After all of the Christmas lights are taken down and put away, it can be a little bit dark and gloomy and depressing, at least for me anyway. So I have several winter DIYs that I think you guys will really enjoy today that will give you that cozy, warm glow throughout the winter. Thank you for stopping by Lavender and Lace. I'm Alicia. Welcome back to my viewers that come and see me each week. And hello, if you are new here, thank you for stopping by today. And let's get started with these winter DIYs. I found a pack of 18 wooden house cutouts on Amazon, and you get 9 different styles in this pack, and these come already painted white, so that was a time saver for me for this project. I didn't have to do any painting to these, but I did want to distress these just a little bit. You guys know how much I like the farmhouse style, so I just took some of my antique wax and did just a light dry brushing on 3 of the houses that I will be using for this project. And I also have one of these round quilting hoops in my stash. This one I believe I found at the thrift store, and I have just had it sitting around in my closet waiting for the perfect project. And I also picked up a bundle of different types of greenery on Amazon as well, and I will link everything that I am able to in the description box. If you guys want to recreate any of the projects that you see today, that will just be a little bit easier for you, and you will already have everything that you need there on Amazon. So I just picked out the greenery picks that I wanted to use for this project. I started with these flatter ones. I thought that would be a good base for this project, and I didn't want to use a lot of hot glue for this because I may change this up for different seasons and holidays. So I just used some green floral wire that I had on hand and just attached my greenery with that. And you could also use pipe cleaners if you have those, or even some jute twine, and just tie your greenery pieces on. And I'm just trying to create a swag here on the bottom portion of my quilting hoop. And I just started adding in different pieces of that greenery, and I did kind of bend those up on the ends just so they would form to the shape of my quilting hoop a little bit better. And I trimmed off any of those extra ends as well. And you can see here that I am using just I think this was actually a trash bag tie. I like to keep those in a drawer in my kitchen and just have them handy when I am working on projects like this. I was having a little bit of trouble with that floral wire with some of these areas. It was just a little bit tough for me to get twisted tight and hold that in place. So I just continued adding the greenery that I wanted for this, trimming off the ends. And I also picked up a couple of these candle rings at Hobby Lobby. And of course, I picked these up when all of the Christmas stuff was still on sale for 50% off. You might be able to find that even cheaper right now. And I just removed several sprigs of that, and I just tucked those in here and there with the rest of my greenery, and I was able to just push the stem underneath the wire or the bread tie that I already had on there, and just made it easy to tuck that in where I wanted it. And here I'm just trimming off all of that floral wire and any of the ends that I still had left on my greenery, just trying to get everything nice and neat and ready for the next step in this project. I picked up a pack of these larger jingle bells at Hobby Lobby. I actually had another project in mind for these, but these worked perfectly to embellish my wreath. And I just removed that hanger from the top, the ribbon, and I was able to just reattach that. I thought that would be the easiest way to attach that to my greenery. Once I had that ribbon reattached there, I was able to just wrap that around the greenery and just tied it in a knot on the back and made sure I had that in place where I wanted it. And I did add just a little bit of hot glue to that jingle bell just so it would stay where I wanted it to in my greenery. And I also had some of these bowl fillers. I've had these on hand, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, I guess. So I just pulled out the colors that I thought would coordinate nicely with my wreath and look like wintertime. And I just played around with those, did a dry fit to see where I wanted to place these and just what would look the best for my wreath. And I just added a little bit of hot glue and just tucked those into the greenery. Again, I'm trying not to add a whole lot of hot glue to that quilting hoop itself, so I'm just adding that glue to the greenery and the bowl fillers. And I had kind of a bare spot on the bottom, so I just cut down some smaller pieces of my greenery that would fit there, and I thought it would look nice just to kind of help hide all of that wire and any of those trash bag ties or anything like that that you still might be able to see. So I just used some hot glue and added all of those extra pieces of greenery, just kind of shaped those to where it would match all the rest of my pieces. And I also added just one more of those bowl fillers. I don't even know, they're like wooden bowl fillers. So I just put that in the middle with my greenery. And then I grabbed my little houses that I had distressed and I just laid those out in the way that I wanted them and just used a little bit of hot glue on the edges and just glued all of my houses together. And I needed something just a little bit larger on the bottom of my houses so I would get a nice fit and hold when I glued those down to my quilting hoop. So I just took one of these tumbling tower blocks and just glued that to the center house. And then I was just easily able to glue that on the inside of my quilting hoop. I tried to get that in the center as best as I could and just used some hot glue and held that in place until it was completely set up. Now, to light up this project, I used some fairy lights and I made sure that I held the battery pack just underneath the little, I don't know what that's called on the top, just where you tighten your hoop. I made sure to keep that there because I'm going to be attaching that to that part of the hoop so you won't be able to see it. And I just held that in place while I wrapped my fairy lights all the way around my quilting hoop. And I do use 2 strands of fairy lights. I didn't quite have enough with just one strand. So I just went all the way around with my lights and then I just used some glue dots to stick the battery packs on the back of that top portion of my quilting hoop. And that is it for this project. The only thing that I think would make this one better is if I had some remote controlled fairy lights. That would be awesome. Then I could just turn it on and off super easy and not have to take it down off of my wreath hanger. What do you guys think about this one? I am slowly working my way through all of the wood pieces that I have in my stash. So I pulled out several things that I already had on hand, and I also pulled out one of the wood pieces that you can find at Dollar Tree. And I'm going to be creating a winter village with all of these pieces. So the first thing that I needed to do was remove any of the stickers or the labels from each of these pieces. And I like to use my heat tool to do that, and just one of my little Cricut spatulas. It just makes it super easy to remove any of that adhesive and the labels that you have on all of these wood pieces. And this one particular piece is a picture holder. So I just removed that little clamp or whatever it's called on the top. Just the little piece that holds your picture. Those just pull out really easy. So I took that off of that one. And then I painted each of these with either 2 or 3 coats of some white chalk paint. And this is the Folk Art brand that you can find at Hobby Lobby. And then I wanted to distress these just a little bit. I didn't like just that stark white color. So I just took one of my distress ink pads, just went around all of the edges first, and then I just took that little dauber and got some color on each of the sides of my little white pieces, as well as that long piece of wood. And again, I am using those houses that I found on Amazon. So I'm just looking through all of the different styles and everything that they had in that pack, just trying to figure out the ones that I want to use. I didn't want to use a lot of the same ones together, of course. So I just looked through everything and picked out several of these that I wanted to use for this project. And once I had a few of those lined up, I just used some hot glue and started gluing all of those together. I did one section with 5 houses, and then I did another with 2, and I used just a couple of single houses for this project. And I wanted to kind of match my houses to the size of the block that I was going to be using for the base. So I just played around with everything before I glued some of them together. Just wanted to make sure that everything looked really good before I started gluing. And once I had all of my placement figured out, I just used some hot glue and started gluing all of my houses down. And once I had all of my houses glued down, I had several of these bottle brush trees in my stash. These either came from Dollar Tree or Hobby Lobby. And I also had just a couple of those really small ones. Again, I like to play around with things and just see what I like first before I start gluing everything down. And some of these trees were a little crooked, so I had to straighten them up and just kind of manipulate those a little bit before I started gluing all of my trees down. I wanted to create a picturesque winter village where everything is covered by a blanket of fluffy white snow and you have a cozy warm glow from the windows. Projects like this create a restful, peaceful vibe to my home decor. Once I had everything placed where I wanted it, I just started gluing everything down with some hot glue. And I also had just a couple of sticks that I had in my stash. I've had these in the house a couple of months probably. I used them for a previous project. So I just cut those down to size maybe about 1 to 1.5 inches in length. Just used my miter shears. And I am making a little mini wood pile to go outside one of my houses. I just thought that added a little bit of character and interest to this piece. So I glued 3 pieces for the base, and then I just took 2 more of those pieces and glued those on the top of that set of 3. And then I just glued 1 more piece on the very top to make my little mini wood pile. And once I had all of that together, I just used some hot glue and glued it in front of one of the houses on that long piece of wood. And I think that's so cute. I think that really just made this look more natural and have just a really nice touch to that. And to add some extra snow to my village, I just used some white hot glue and added that around the base of my houses as well as on the top of the roofs. And I also added some to my little mini wood pile just to make this look really cold and snowy. Now, to light up my village, I have some of these remote controlled tea lights. I have loved these throughout the Christmas season. I had them with my nativity, and you just put them where you want them. Just use your remote control and either turn them off or on, and they just add a really pretty glow to whatever piece that you want them to. But this is how my village turned out. I hope you guys love this one as much as I do. I think this one is just very simple but elegant, and it's going to add some really cozy winter vibes to my decor. I don't find a lot of the ceramic pieces at Dollar Tree too often, so when I find it, I will grab them even if I don't have an idea at that exact moment. So I picked up two of these ceramic vases and I finally came up with an idea that I was happy with. I had some of this mesh kind of snowy, glittery ribbon from Hobby Lobby, so I just cut some pieces of that to wrap all the way around my vase, and I just used a very small amount of hot glue and glued that in place. I did do, I think, two or three layers of this ribbon just to get the look that I wanted on the bottom of each of my vases. And I did try to keep that hot glue all in the same area. I thought that would just make it look a little bit better once I have this project finished. And of course, the seam where I glued everything down will be on the back side. You can do as many layers of this ribbon as you want to. I just opted with two. I finally figured out, remembered how many layers I did. I did this project before Christmas, you guys, so sometimes I have a hard time remembering exactly what I did. So, anyway, back to the project. I also had a couple of these ceramic coasters. I really like to have those on hand because you can do a lot of different projects with them. But I'm going to be using them as the top for my little candle holders that I'm working on here. So I wanted to glue them to those vases. So I just turned the vase upside down and traced the top of that into the cork that's on the underside of my coaster, and that just helped me be able to get everything lined up once I applied my glue and have that centered on the top of my vase. And to glue those down, I used some E6000 and just a little bit of hot glue so I would get that instant hold, and I did let that set up overnight just so that E6000 would have time to dry and harden. And I wanted to make this project look a little bit snowy, of course. So I used some Epsom salt and some glitter, and I just mixed that together until I liked the look that I had. There's no specific measurements for this, and I did have some extra of this mixture left over, and I just put that in a sandwich bag to use for another winter project. And I have had these little mini candy canisters in my stash for quite some time. Had no idea what I wanted to do with these, and they were perfect for this project. I did a light coat of Mod Podge on each of these, and I left the lid on at this point because that just helped me be able to hold that and apply my Mod Podge. So I did work in sections. I just did the front side first with the Mod Podge and added my Epsom salt and glitter. And I added a pretty thick layer of this and just knocked off any of that extra. And I did that for both of my little candy canisters, and I let those set up overnight to dry as well. And then I sprayed them with my acrylic sealer. I'm hoping that that will help some of the Epsom salt and glitter not to shed as bad. You could also use hairspray or another layer of Mod Podge if you don't have that clear sealer. And I wanted to add something to the top of each of my canisters. I thought they would look a little plain without some embellishment. So I had a couple of different wooden finials, and both of these came from Hobby Lobby. And I did a couple of coats of my white chalk paint on those as well. And after my paint had dried, I did want to trim off just that extra piece on the bottom of that taller, the more decorative finial. I didn't do that in the beginning because it was just easier to paint it if I had something to hold on to. So I just used my miter shears and just pressed all the way around that until I was able to completely cut through and cut off that extra wooden piece. And then I just took a piece of sandpaper and just sanded off all of the rough edges on the bottom of my finial. And even after I sprayed these, you guys, it still did want to fall off and shed quite a bit. So you might want to try the Mod Podge or some hairspray. But to attach my finials, I just used some hot glue and glued those on the top of each of my little candy canisters. And I did kind of scuff up this one finial while I was cutting off that extra piece on the bottom, so I just did a little bit of touch-up paint. And I had some little sprigs of greenery in my stash and some clear snowflakes and some white glittery ones as well. So I wanted to add just a little bit of something extra to the top. It just looked really plain to me. So I just took a couple of sprigs of my greenery, and I also decided to go with the white glittery snowflake on the top of each of these. So I just used some hot glue and added my little greenery pieces and my snowflake, just held everything in place until my glue had set up. And I also wanted to add just a little something extra to those ceramic vases as well. So I just took one piece of greenery and glued that down and added the clear snowflake, and then I glued one of the white snowflakes on top of that one. You could do whatever you wanted to for embellishment for this project. I just love having the snowflakes and the greenery for winter time. And I did remove the bottom, the lid on the canisters just for this part. I have some more of those tea lights on hand and also some of these grapevine wreaths. I just added that to the top of each one of these. I opted not to glue those down just because that will make it easier to switch out my tea lights, replace batteries and things like that, or switch these out and just add a candle to them. But that is it for this project. I think this one is just beautiful, and I just love the warm glow on the inside of these. It just reminds me of a snow globe. What do you guys think about this one? That wraps up these winter DIYs. I hope you enjoyed the projects today. Please give the video a thumbs up if you did, and I hope you will consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Be sure you click that notification bell so you don't miss any of my future videos that will be coming out. Also, click that hot button if you can find it. I hope you have a blessed day, and I will see you in the next one.